Welcome to this testing preview. We're looking ahead to next weekend, where we'll be live on Sky Sports F1 for all 3 days of pre-season testing, 8 hours a day of cars on track. And I'm very pleased to say I will be joined by those of us who'll be out there this weekend, just with the absence of Crofty, but he'll be there with us. Martin Brundle, Karun, Chandhok and Ted Kravitz. I'm going to start with you, Martin. How are you?
Absolutely great. Looking forward to the season. Been out and done a little bit of pre-season filming here and there where we were able to, and my suitcase is packed and I'm ready to go, but we fly out Wednesday. So I'm that eager.
God, I thought I was the first one to pack normally. Karun, how have you been? Have you been busy and able to keep busy during this?
Yeah, I think, the same as everyone else, really. We're trying to do our bits and pieces of work that we can amidst, all the rules and restrictions. I think we're all just ready to go back to a racetrack. It's been a long time since we were last at a circuit, seeing cars go around and just looking forward to it. And I enjoy going to testing because we can actually go trackside and watch the cars in the flesh rather than on the timing screens.
Yeah, I loved it last year, and going trackside with you was one of my highlights from Barcelona, so I'll be dragging you out in Bahrain. And Ted, talking of Bahrain, better weather, sandals and shorts ready to go?
Yeah, if you weren't excited about the season getting going and excited about testing, it's one of my favourite times of the year. The fact is that we're not going to be laden down with snow or bad weather or those cold mornings or freezing evenings when I have to lend you my coat, Rachel. It's going to be good, nice, warm weather. But yeah, it's been pretty good, hasn't it? We've been in lockdown all of this time. I've been doing the homeschooling with the 3 kids, become quite an expert on fronted adverbials and improper fractions. So I'm glad to ditch that. Kids going back to school tomorrow, Monday, and we can get on with the F1 season.
I know you're hosting the show, Rach, but how are you? I feel the need to ask, how are you doing?
I'm really good, really good. I'm not going to say I've enjoyed it, not at all, but I've actually been pretty good during all this, and been out and about as well, been to a couple of launches, been to see people, which was really, really nice, and feels like the season is literally just around the corner. I'm really excited for it, actually. And do you know what struck me was actually the teams are all really excited this year. There's a buzz among all of them about their cars, which is brilliant. I mean, I was at Williams the other day, and from their track day stuff, they were telling, I was there for their team internal launch. So I heard some of the stuff they said, which obviously I'm not going to say on the media, but all the teams seem to be buzzing and excited. And I love it. Which you went and saw, Lewis, Martin, how did that go?
It was good, actually. So we did a couple of features with him. We'll play out through the year on Sky F1. A qualifying masterclass I wanted to do with him. He was very generous, but a bit grumpy, actually, I thought generally. And it's interesting that his right-hand man, Mark Hines, is no longer working with him. And I sensed he possibly wasn't super happy with the way the negotiations have worked out at Mercedes-Benz. So once we got over that, I did say to him, look, you're going to burst through 100 poles this year at some point, most likely. And he goes, why? McLaren were a quarter of a second behind us in Abu Dhabi. Now they've got our engine. And what about Red Bull? Maybe the high rate works, and don't count out Ferrari, and the Aston Martin will be strong. And he sort of really challenged me quite hard. And I said, well, you have got 98 of them, mostly in the hybrid era, Lewis, and you scored 10 last year. There's a half a chance you'll get 2 more this year. But when we got over that little hurdle, because Lewis does love to poke you a little bit before you sit down to do stuff like that. I had an hour with him talking about that amazing race in Istanbul last year where he took his 7th world title. And as I said, he was very generous on sort of inside his head, inside his life of a Grand Prix weekend and how qualifying unfolds.
Great stuff. And Karun, you've been out and about as well, haven't you? Who have you been speaking to?
Yeah, I had a chance to speak with the Ferrari drivers. It's a big season. I think one of the biggest questions going into this year is, are Ferrari going to come back? We saw that any circuit which was power sensitive with long straights, they massively suffered, often getting knocked out in Q1, in Sebastian Vettel's case at least. So, it's obviously Carlos Sainz coming in, a big change. There's a new energy about it. He's really pumped up. I've been speaking to him through the winter as well as at their launch day. But I think everyone's waiting to see when we get to Bahrain next week, will Ferrari be back up to speed in terms of their straight line speed?
And Ted, where have you been poking your nose?
Well, went up to the McLaren shakedown and 24 years after the first sort of Silverstone McLaren shakedown that I first went to when David Coulthard was shaking down the car. And I remember team manager Dave Ryan had a go at me for not wearing team gear. But anyway, this time we were back, and it was Daniel Ricciardo's first go in the car. So just sort of marking that for a feature we're doing later on. And then managed to sneak into one of the Mercedes filming activities to have word with James Allison. We were doing our usual what's new on the Mercedes car feature, and looking at the cars. First of all, Rachel, I thought, well, not much is new at all, but then we went and talked for about 45 minutes. So it turns out there are quite a lot of things that are new on the cars, even though at first look they might look pretty similar to last year.
Well, we're going to come on to that actually, because one of the things I noticed, and I remember texting you at the time from the McLaren launch, was that area between the side pod and that front wheel, that barge board area on theirs at least looks really complicated. Is that where you're going to be looking first when you get to testing?
Well, the barge boards have taken on a bit more importance because they've lost about 10-15% of the downforce. Why have they lost the downforce? Because the FIA have taken it away from them to protect the tyres, to keep the speeds down for safety and general, to stop things going out of control. So it has meant they've had to find downforce really from other places. The barge boards is one of those places, and also from the diffuser as well, because that's had some bits and bobs taken away from it. But best way to think about it is, when sometimes a driver gets a rear puncture and the rear tire sort of flails around and rips apart part of the floor, and then for the rest of the race they're nowhere because they've lost a lot of downforce. Well, it's that part of the floor, that exact part of the floor, that they've taken away just in front of the rear tire. So that's the area where we're going to see sprouting up while they try and recover that downforce. But it's been quite a big change, surprisingly big for things that don't look the same. And while the tub itself is the same, they are allowed to develop freely. They're allowed to develop the aerodynamics.
We lost a little gap there, Ted, but we know what you were saying. Don't worry. Karun, on that then, I mean, when I was talking to McLaren, everyone's been allowed to change certain parts, but it's really restricted this year. How much of an impact has them having to also incorporate a new engine going to have affected their design and their development?
You're absolutely right, Rach. I mean, every team has been given there's a token system where you're allowed to use a couple of tokens. Different teams have prioritized on different areas. McLaren, as you said, have had to use theirs to make sure that they can package the Mercedes power unit in the right way. They have had to shoehorn it. I'm sure there's been a few compromises, but ultimately they're still going to be in a better position than they would have been, I think, if they'd stayed with the Renault one. So it's probably not in the most ideal way they would have liked, but there's going to be some benefits. I think when you look up and down the grid, it's really interesting to see, for example, AlphaTauri, they've decided to stick with the 2019 Red Bull gearbox, which will obviously be, 2 years old when we start the season, because they didn't want to use their tokens for the rear of the car. They wanted to do a new nose, a new front wing. So there's different philosophies there. Aston Martin, I'm fascinated to see, because they've got that really revolutionary rear suspension, which Ted and James Allison did a feature on last year. They're going to benefit from that this year. They've been able to carry that over onto their cars. Every team using tokens in different ways. And I think that's going to be something that we'll see unfold only when we get to qualifying. This is the biggest thing. We've seen all these cars launch. Some of you have been to the launches, but none of us are seeing real cars yet. And I think we'll only really start to see them come the end of Bahrain testing.
Mark, what's stood out for you from what you've seen so far? As Karun says, they're going to change and we won't see the real thing until they're on track. But has anything stood out for you from any of the cars that have been launched?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit taken aback. I mean, obviously Red Bull have called theirs the RB16B, just to underline the fact that they're not changing that much. But I think the aerodynamics are a significant impact, as Ted has pointed out. So we'll see who gets that right and whose philosophies generally work better with that. I like a lot of the liveries. Mercedes, I always think really ace it, I must say. And the Aston Martin look good. I want to see them out on track. And maybe under the lights in Bahrain, they'll look different again. A sunny day, grey day, and have a look at just how the cars are on track, how they're performing. As ever, it's all about the stopwatch, not the colour scheme. But it's nice to see some new sponsors coming into Formula One as well. And generally, I sense that we're expecting a tighter season because the regulations are also hauling back the top teams in terms of the amount of money they can spend, the resource they have, the amount of time they have in the wind tunnel. for example, Ferrari, because they finished sixth in the World Championship, have got 12.5% more time in the wind tunnel than Mercedes. So the pack is really going to be closed up over the next year or two, starting with 2021. So I think that's why there's a general excitement about, yes, it's a carryover. Yes, it's a holding pattern, because we thought we were going to get the all new cars this year. They've been delayed until 2022 for obvious reasons. So I think there's that expectation of, you know what, with the new Pirelli tyres that are heavier and slower, maybe there will be a reset.
Karun, what do you think of the liveries? We've got a load of new liveries on the grid this year.
We do. I've never been one to get excited by liveries, to be honest. I'm much more interested in what's underneath that and how competitive they are. For me, there's four big questions here. Are Red Bull going to pick up where they left off in Abu Dhabi, where Max was frankly dominant? It was a brilliant win. We know Lewis was under the weather, but still, they were coming on strong. They've got a new gearbox, which they've kept very, very secret. In fact, everything they unveiled from their launch was off an old car. They've been super secretive, more so than normal. So there's something there with the rear end and this new gearbox they've got. So I'm waiting to see whether that pays dividends. Ferrari, we've already talked about. I think that's another big question. I think Aston Martin, especially Seb Vettel, are we going to see the pre-Hockenheim 2018 Sebastian Vettel, or are we going to see the one that's struggled for the last 2.5 years? And finally, I'm really fascinated by the McLaren Daniel Ricciardo story. It's a really interesting dynamic there. Lando Norris has had 2 strong seasons coming as a rookie. This is an opportunity for him to go up against a driver that we know has won races and is really at the top of his game. They've got the Merc engine. I think these are the 4 big stories for me to be watching this year.
Okay, well, you've preempted me there then. Right, teams then, partnerships for this season. Where are you looking? Where are your eyes going to be trained first? Which one excites you the most? And which one do you think possibly could be the most challenging over the season? I'll come to you first, Ted.
Well, let's start at who's going to win the World Championship, shall we? I think Karun's right that Red Bull have got some things which they're not telling anybody about up until the first race till we find out. What I'm most interested on the Red Bull is how Honda are doing with this new engine. They brought forward all the good stuff that they were planning for 2022 to this year's engine, because of course they're not going to be around in 2022. This is the swan song season for Honda. So they've got some good stuff on the engine. Let's see what that does. And that will really dictate, I think. We know the Red Bull chassis is good. They won the last race in Abu Dhabi, so they'll be there or thereabouts. Just depends on the engine. Max Verstappen, championship challenger. Let's hope. Then
you're going to have the support, Ted, though, from Sergio for this then. This is what the issue's been in the past, not having that. Is Sergio the man to bring that support to help him get to that position?
Well, he's there to support Red Bull win the Constructors' Championship, and I know what you mean, support in races, yes. But Sergio said himself that it's going to be a pretty steep learning curve, and trying to beat Max Verstappen in qualifying is going to be pretty difficult. We'll see what Sergio can do in races with that support role. But in Mercedes, that's the interesting one for me. I was interested to hear what Martin was saying about Lewis, whether he's trying to find some more motivation for this season as well, finding something to sort of build him up. Does he feel the need anymore as he decides to sort of divert more of his attention into his drive for diversity in motorsport and racial equality around the world? Does he feel like he needs the motorsport thing anymore? Well, we'll see. What's he doing to motivate himself? And on the other side of the garage, Valtteri Bottas seems to be doing a Nico Rosberg this year, doesn't he? He's shedding off any of the things that are distractions. He says he's going to be more selfish this year, aware of the fact that sometimes that's not a very nice human characteristic, but it's only a year out of his life, he says, that he has to be very selfish, and he's really going to try and do everything he can to go for the championship. So what do you take from that, guys? Do you think that's just a motivation thing for himself, or do you think with that 1-year contract he's kind of been told, would he have been told, okay, Valtteri, this is it, if you can't do it this year, then we're going to get George in for next year?
I think it's a make or break year for Valtteri, and he's got nothing to lose. I think he'll come out of the blocks very quickly. And if he's got any more, if he's got another gear, and then we all talked about Valtteri, V 2.0 and all of that sort of thing. If he's got anything left in his toolbox, he's got to deliver it this year, because possibly Verstappen might be on the marketplace. Who knows? We'll see how Red Bull goes. I actually think Red Bull are going to be very strong. A couple of little things Christian Horner, the boss, has said about if only we'd have known that last year, we'd have been so much stronger. I think that performance that they put in Abu Dhabi and how they've developed the car over the winter, if they hit the ground running and deliver their potential straight away, which they haven't often done, it must be said, I think Red Bull will be incredibly fast. And my takeaway from Lewis was definitely he's looking over his shoulder at the other teams, Ted. And, it's odd. It's odd that his new deal was so late. It's odd that it's only for 1 year. So whichever way you try and paint that or dress it up, it's not optimum, I don't think, for Mercedes and Lewis going forward through this year. So I'm expecting, if I'm honest, a little bit of friction there. But to answer your question, Rach, I'm really looking forward to a lot of new driver pairings. And Ricciardo at McLaren, yes. I think Sainz is going to be awesome in the Ferrari. Looking forward to Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri, because I think he could be fascinating to watch. I think there'll be a lot of speed and a few wild moments there as he's finding his way. But lots of combinations and lots of new things to look out for.
And we haven't been mentioned Alonso, guys. That's the amazing thing at all.
No, yeah.
We've got to this point. And I mean, he's not had the easiest winter build, has he, with his bike accident, of course, but the team seemed to suggest he's going to be fighting fit for testing and do up his helmet across that jaw as well as he needs to. So that's another good one to watch.
Well, Karun, actually, I want to talk to you about the Mercedes thing as well and get your thoughts on it. I'm sitting down with Lewis in Bahrain at testing, which I'm really looking forward to, because as you say, Martin, where is his mindset at right now? You know, I'll give myself this year to get that 8th title, but I've got other things now that I want to go and pursue. And that feeling definitely came across in the interviews he did at the launch. But Karun, what do you think? This Valtteri, his comments recently, I thought exactly the same as Ted. He's doing a Nico Rosberg, and he thinks this is potentially the only way he can beat Lewis. What do you think about the season ahead for the two of them?
I think Martin's hit the nail on the head. It's make or break, isn't it? That Sakir Grand Prix weekend was a brilliant opportunity for Mercedes to put, their two drivers against each other in a direct competition. George coming straight in. And fair play to them. They could have done, shall we say, the slightly less exciting option and put their reserve driver Van Dorn in and just got through the weekend. But actually, I have a lot of respect for them for creating this little bit of friction, a little bit of tension. I think, they created a mini shootout in some ways, and George did a superb job. I mean, let's all be honest about it. So I think Martin's absolutely right. This is a make or break season for Valtteri. He's being teammates to Lewis Hamilton is probably right up there with the hardest job in Formula One, alongside being teammates with Max Verstappen. They're brilliant jobs because you're getting to drive the best two cars on the grid, but it's also the hardest jobs because your reference is so high. Frankly, Valtteri, if he's in that position, should be giving it 110% anyway. So, this, maybe he's talked about a shift. I'd be interested to see what effect it has, but, the way I view it, you need to be doing it every time anyway.
Problem is, of course, and arguing against my own self, that I'm looking forward to Valtteri Bottas beating Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton's a machine, though, isn't he? I mean, he's an absolute consistency machine. And that's Valtteri's problem. Sometimes he'd turn up, Valtteri, and you'd sort of see his mind wasn't really on it, and he'd have an off weekend by his own admission. Mentally, he wasn't in the right state for a weekend. Hamilton is a machine, and stopping that with a record-breaking 8th championship on the horizon, surely that's too much to ask from Bottas, isn't it? No, I'm arguing against myself. I think he can do it, but it's going to be good to find out.
Should the rest of us go while you just finish this conversation with yourself, Dave?
Yeah, we'll come back to you.
Let us know how you concluded.
We'll come back to you a little later and you'll still be arguing. Just a very quick one on that. You mentioned George. I mean, I was at that press conference and he was asked question after question after question about, have you had word from Mercedes? What have you been told? He said, I've got no promises from Mercedes. There's nothing there. I've not spoken to them about it. I'm at Williams. And he actually talked up the investment and the changes that are happening at Williams. And he said 2022 was starting from scratch. You've got to assume he would like to be in that Mercedes seat, wouldn't he, in 2022? But he's going to face a year of these questions, isn't he? I mean, do you see him without question being in the Mercedes in 2022, Martin? Or do you think there's anything left for him to prove?
No, I think you're You've always got a lot to prove in Formula One. You're only as good as your last race, that all those old sayings, and he needs to really keep applying himself. It seems as if Williams might have reversed the ship off the rocks and are turning it around and pointing it in the right direction, which is good. But no, George will have to fight for it and show that he's, like he did in Sakir, as Karun said, he's the real deal. And I think, I said to him afterwards, you look born to be leading a Grand Prix, and you were so comfortable. So I think we have to wait and see. But you would not turn down the chance of a Mercedes-Benz, of course, because they will, despite the new cost caps and resource restrictions and all of that, they will have been working on that car since middle of last year. So hard, probably even earlier than that. So hard that I think they've got a great chance of getting it right first time again. And if George gets half a chance, he should get his backside in it. Yep.
And I think one thing we've all got to keep in mind is the day Lewis decides to stop, and I think we've all touched on, the reason why that might happen in the next couple of years. The whole market's going to change, isn't it? That whole driver market at the top end, do Mercedes go with a George and Bottas combination, which, yes, they will undoubtedly be very competitive and win races, but it hasn't got necessarily the proven championship challenging ability of a Ricciardo or a Verstappen perhaps. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think for us to watch this season is the body language coming out of that Mercedes camp on Lewis staying beyond this year.
And the other name we haven't mentioned yet, we've got this far into it without mentioning there's a Schumacher back on the grid. I mean, I know it's in a Haas, but if they have managed to get, Ferrari have managed to do something, I know they're saying that Fred Vasseur said they've recovered some of the power deficit. If they get a benefit from that, he could show something or other. What are you expecting to see from him, Martin?
I think he's a great little racing driver. He seems to be a bit of a slow starter if you look at F3 and F2. I think he'll have a bit of that luxury in F1 because Haas are making it quite clear they're not putting a lot of investment into this 21 car. They want to focus on 22. And Ferrari have given them a lot of resource to help do that as well. So Mick's got to beat his teammate and be there on those crazy or rainy or crazy and rainy days. Trying to steal a world championship point, outperform the car like Mark Webber and Fernando Alonso did in a Minardi, Michael Schumacher did in a Jordan, Ayrton Senna did in a Tolman. I'm not putting him up there at that level, but he's necessarily, we'll have to wait and see. But I think Mick has just got to keep his head down, not make silly mistakes, and be there to pick up the pieces and just show. I think he's got a year's grace in that car.
Martin, are you guys confused about where Ferrari have placed it? Because when it all was unfolding, I don't understand why they've placed these drivers where they have. I mean, to me, they should have put Mick alongside Kimi at Alpha. He could have learned a lot from Kimi. I think, it would have potentially been a slightly better team. But having a reference for him would have been really good. With all due respect, I can't see Giovinazzi ever getting a seat with a works Ferrari team, should we say, the red car. So, they could have put him, a Haas, and then at least both the customer teams would have had one experience reference. Problem for me with Mick's situation is we'll never have a proper reference because he's against another rookie. Don't you think so?
Yeah, it's the blind leading the blind a bit in terms of Formula One experience, isn't it, with him and his teammate Mazepin? But I saw your comment in Autosport magazine last week as well on that. But my understanding is that I don't think Ferrari can just willy-nilly place those drivers as they wish at Haas and what is Sauber, Alfa Romeo. And my understanding is the boss of Alfa wanted to keep his two drivers. So, because you're right, the obvious place to put Mick Schumacher was alongside Kimi Räikkönen, and they probably weren't able to do that, I would guess.
Ted, your thoughts on Mick for this season ahead?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty hard from him, isn't it? Because the car won't be developed. It seems that it's likely that Haas F1 will be at the back of the grid as Williams try to make their way back up this season. And then, for the whole of the Haas team, it's going to be difficult. For Nikita Mazepin, anytime there's a tweet from the Haas account or him, he gets a online torrent of abuse because of his bad behavior, very bad behavior last year. He's still apologizing for it. We'll see if that's enough for everybody. He accepts that it's not the behavior that anybody should be doing. But it's pretty clear that his father's company, Uralchem, is well, not only is it the title sponsor of the car, but with the Russian flag on the car, it's pretty clear that Mazepin isn't going anywhere. So everybody's going to have to deal with that very unsavory issue with him towards the end of last year. And, he'll do well. I think he understands, Mazepin, that, he is essentially a decent racing driver. All right, maybe he's not a sort of Lewis Hamilton top level guy, but he needs to understand he's got to put his head down, concentrate on the driving, and hope that people can forgive and forget. Whether they can or not, I'm not quite sure.
All right. We're fast coming to the end of this, but I want a brief word from each of you. Your hopes for 2021. Martin, I'll start with you.
That at least one and hopefully two or three teams can take the fight to Mercedes and it goes to the wire, the championship. And, we're going to try a few other things through the season as well. And let's hope we can get to at least more than 18 races or so, or the 23 scheduled, with some fans looking down from the grandstands at all of them, I hope.
Karun, he's covered a lot off there. What's left for you? Were your hopes for 2021 pretty similar, I imagine?
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to see the World Championship battle go down to the last race between two different teams. I think if you think of all the great seasons in F1, that's what we had, and it'll be wonderful if Red Bull can hit the ground running, and we can get that fight. But equally, if we can see Daniel Ricciardo win a race for McLaren, that would be brilliant. So yeah, I think lots to look forward to, and Fernando Alonso getting back on a Formula One podium as well. I'm going to throw that in there as well.
Ted, is there anything left for you?
Fernando Alonso could win a race. George Russell getting his first points for Williams, even though he's got lots of a few points already for Mercedes. I'm also looking forward to Sebastian Vettel in it's sort of racing green, but not quite, Aston Martin. And I don't know, I think we're going to see quite a few podiums for Sebastian Vettel, because the thing that Aston Martin have been saying is that, look, we will change the car. Inherently, we have a car that's a bit more towards Sebastian's pretty unique driving style, but we used to change our car a lot to suit Checo Perez's driving style, and we can change it to suit Sebastian Vettel's driving style. And I think that's the last piece in the puzzle. I think Vettel has renewed and refreshed over the winter. He understands, and he's at peace with what happened at Ferrari, and he's going to come back. And I think Vettel might win a race. Vettel and Perez winning a race again in different cars, in the cars that they swapped. That's what I'm looking forward to.
That's on tape, Ted. We'll come back to you and see if that happens. I'm just looking forward to getting out of the house, I'll be honest. I don't care what happens. Let's just get out of the house and get back to racing. And yes, have the fans in, Martin, completely. Let's see some fans back at tracks. It's been brilliant. Thank you all very much. I will see you in a few days' time. We are live at testing. We'll have 8 hours of track action for you every single day from Bahrain, as well as 2 shows in the evening. We'll have a roundup show, and Ted will have his notebook and his binoculars as well. So make sure you join us for those. We're very much looking forward to getting back out there again. I will see you all on a plane very soon. Thanks for watching.
See you, Heathrow.